Today's collectible spot, we are having a look at the Square-Enix products, variants, Play Arts Kai action figures Marvel Universe. This is Thor. Spot picked us up from the folks over at Entertainment Earth. Actually a good place to pick up a lot of the variant Play Arts Kai figures if you're looking to pick those up. And actually the same place where Spot picked up the Captain America as well. It is recommended for ages 15 and up, and it does have a choking hazard, as some small parts are not suitable for children under 3 years of age. The front box art kind of gives us a slightly illustrated, very anime style design of Thor there. If you have a look at the packaging on the side, it doesn't really say anything other than Marvel Universe Variants Play Arts Kai action figures designed by Hitoshi Kondo. And then on the back of the package, some image shots of what the figure is going to look like in hand. He comes with actually a couple of interchangeable heads. Comes with, of course, Mjolnir, all of which we'll have a look at when we get this guy out of box. To check out more from the folks over at Square-Enix, you can go to www.square-enix.shop.com. And then finally, just before Spot gets this opened up, if you open up the flap on the side, you are treated to not only what the Thor figure is going to look like, all his multitudes of accessories, but then also you have a read-up on Thor. As lightning answers the call of thunder, so I, Thor, Odinson, answer the call for justice. Tremble before the sound and fury, signifying Asgard's mightiest steel thyselves. Villains for combat, which will echo through time as legend through the halls of men and gods alike. Born to the royal family of the godly plane of Asgard, Thor was hungered to prove himself in battle for as long as he's been able to carry a weapon. The All-Father Odin granted him the Warhammer Mjolnir, a weapon forged by the very cosmos. Dubbed God of Thunder, Thor's life has been filled with combat and adventure. Visiting the human realm of Midgard taught the brash and proud god some humility. He forged firm alliances, but also found there were worthy foes, developing a profound sense of duty to protect Earth. Mjolnir's engravings feature motifs inspired by traditional Viking patterns, and a hook in its hilt adds a variant Play Arts Kai twist. Runic orbs, pieces of Mjolnir itself, are inlaid in Thor's armor, further harnessing the power of summoned lightning by storing it for later use. Since he favors his right side in combat, Thor's left arm is heavily protected with an extra metal cuff and gauntlet. Whether fighting terrestrial threats or something a little extra, Thor swings his hammer to protect his friends, defeat his foes, and sometimes just for a little bit of fun. Verily, the variant Play Arts Kai Thor is worthy of your attention. That's a considerable read-up for such a, well, judging really by packaging-wise, a pretty worthy figure. That being said, Spot's going to take a break. I'm going to get this opened up. And when we come back, we're going to get a better look at the variants Play Arts Kai action figures of Thor. There's more heading away, guys. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Just before we have a look at Mighty Thor, let's have a look at the mighty display stand that also comes with a figure. Yeah, it is the same figure to stand as what we get with other Play Arts Kai releases. It is a translucent, almost translucent clear display stand with an adjustable neck that you can just separate these. Sometimes these little tabs get stuck to themselves. There we go. And you can adjust it depending on the size of the figure or depending on how you want to have the figure displayed. This little end section here adjusts, it also rotates, and you have a waist clip that opens and closes. Putting that to the side, let's get a better look at the figure. This figure is beautiful. What a good looking figure. It is decked from head to toe with tons of sculpt, tons of paint, tons of detail. One of the first thing we have a look at though is his head. Thor's head is a sight to be seen. A really beautiful, not really so much beautiful, but in the sense of a beautiful sculpt, it's one of the best sculpts I've seen on a Play Arts Kai figure releases. He's also lucky enough that he's one of the few Play Arts Kai figure releases that gets himself an interchangeable head. The default look of Thor's face is a more subtle, more confident, I guess, if you would consider that face sculpt. But he does also have a more angrier face sculpt, which, if I can move my fingers out of the way, he also has a more angrier face sculpt depending on which preference you would like to have him displayed with. I'll show you how to change it out in a second, but he is also sporting his Thor helmet. Decked in silver. It's almost like a bluish gray that they've added there as accents as well, which carries over to the top of the head, gets a little bit darker of a wash there. Quite a phenomenal head sculpt. And equally so a quite impressive helmet sculpt as well. He's got the tailored or sculpted out hair. It's kind of blowing out from his cape. The cape is stellar. Oh, I love that color of the cape that they've given it. Just a delicious, almost raspberry red. His eyes, I think, again, facially, Thor is one of the better face sculpts I've seen on these figures. Unlike the Captain America. The Captain America was a departure. I mean, even during that review I mentioned it's a departure of a design. It's not normally what you perceive when you think of Captain America. Thor here definitely looks like Thor. They've taken some liberties, I guess, with the armor itself, but still, without any doubt, you know that that's Thor. Now, when you need to remove the head, what you need to do, and I don't really like that we have to go as far as this method, but you have to actually take the head off the ball joint. And I've tried this already a couple of times, and every single time I do it, I always worry. I don't even want to say it, but you have to pop the head off the ball joint. Why I worry as much is the neck socket. Look how thin that little peg point is on the head. I really worry about that. So I'm likely, rotate his neck properly, I'm likely to find the head that I'm happiest with and just leave it be. Just don't even play around with it all that much. So to change out his head, you just have to reach around to the front, pop that right off. And actually, while we're at it, Spot almost dropped it. While we're at it, there's the differences in face sculpts. Again, one is more calmer, one is more angrier. Just again, a matter of preference for you, the collector who's going to be displaying Thor. Pop the head back into place. And then simply just revisit the head back into the neck socket. Again, not something I want to be doing on a regular basis. It's not something, whoa, I try not to drop Thor in the process, but not something I'm going to want to do on a regular basis. I think once I got the head back into place, I think I'm just likely to leave it be. Looking at the rest of Thor's armor, it's a pretty faithful, I think, design of Thor's costume. Again, looking at it, they didn't take too many luxuries, I think, designing out the armor and like the overall costume that he wears. The armor itself is a blackish, almost dark gray color outlined in a lighter gunmetal color, almost it seems, for a trim. And then he's got those 6 sphere-like orbs that are making up the front of his armor. The coloring seems to get a little bit more darker blue at the bottom or the base of the spheres there, and it becomes more silver as it gets closer to the top. He's got accents of gold. There's almost a lighter goldish silver there as well. And then for his leggings aren't quite blue. In fact, they almost come across more a teal color, a greenish blue. And one thing I love about PlayArt's Kai figures, let's just move the cape out of the way here, is the multiple layers. There's a layer of that mesh black color there, and then that's trimmed in the silver. Underneath the plate, you can see how it's been strapped into his legging there. He's got his lower shin guards, which is a darker, not quite gold, not quite pewter, but almost like a color in between, and then trimmed in gold down the bottom by his feet. Loads of detail, loads of sculpt going into his armor here. As the read-up had indicated, you can see how he's got more of a heavily protected arm on the one side. Also with that gold shoulder pad with some nice decorated treatment there as well. The other arm is a little bit more on the bare, opened area, but that's okay. He's going to be holding his sword, or his hammer, Mjolnir there. And then lastly, let's just kind of flip the cape out of the way. We'll just spin this out of the way. Now, it uses the same sort of cape treatment that we've seen before with Batman figures and Superman figures. They split the cape, and then the cape is ratcheted on its own individual hinges. This also has a hinge point area too. Well, not quite a hinge, it's more like a peg point, but it's raised enough that you can still get lots of movement in the cape. Obviously, you start separating the cape right in the middle. It looks a little jarring. If anything, this would be the kind of thing where you would want to sway it to the side if you want to have capes, the Thor cape kind of blowing off to the side there. But there's an underside of what his armor looks like, at least on the back end of it there. I love this cape though. One of the best capes I've seen on a Play Arts Kai figure. That raspberry red. I would say that's a raspberry red. I don't know. Maybe I have to check my eyes, but it looks more like a raspberry or a lighter orangey red than a dark, dark red. And I think it goes well with the rest of the armor. If it was a darker, you almost need the popping of that red just to accent the armor as opposed to it being a dark red. It also does come across slightly as if it's metallic. It is textured too. It's not a smooth cape. And all the little recessed, wrinkled areas here, or where the folds of the cape are, they've got a dark wash in there just to kind of make everything kind of pop out, especially up here as well. And I love how this is sculpted at the top here rather than the cape just kind of going up to sockets. This cleans it off, this finishes off nicely. It kind of keeps everything well presented, even from the back. And as it goes with Play Arts Kai figures, sometimes you tend to get concealed joints. Thor is no exception here. His skirt is also a separate rubber piece that's hiding over the articulation that's found underneath. And good thing they hide that. It kind of, again, seals off the figure. It doesn't look like there's any visible sockets other than really the elbow area. As you would probably expect though, the cape, as good as the cape may be, does add a little bit of problem getting him to stand. I've arched him a little bit forward to compensate for the fact that the cape makes him somewhat back heavy. That Thor does tend to topple back, so I've just kind of got the arch of the back going there just to kind of compensate for it. Let's have a look at the accessories that come included with the figure. Of course, the first thing we would have to look at is Mjolnir. A very large hammer, very, very cool looking hammer. One of the more interesting looking Mjolnirs as well. It's got that little hooked bottom as in the read-up of the packaging. A red handle, almost similar in color. Maybe it's just a slight shade off, a little bit similar in color to the cape. The hammer itself is a gunmetal gray. There's a little bit of blue accents there as well, as if it's projecting the light from the top here. I like that. Thor can hold the hammer. Currently he's got closed fists, but he does have interchangeable hands. I'll show you that in a second. If you want something a little bit more dynamic, and actually just before I say that, the hammer actually doesn't have a lot of weight, but as you probably would guess, there is more weight at the bottom than the handle itself. But the neat thing about the hammer is you can either go for something like this, or Square-Enix also gives you an attachment. And it just kind of clips. It doesn't really... I mean, it just kind of clips into place like that. You can have it as if he's summoning the power of the lightning into the hilt of Mjolnir. It's somewhat translucent when it comes to the areas of the blue, and then it's decoed in silver as well, almost a light silver color. If that isn't enough, what you can also do too is take this off. Take the back of the hammer. Finding the back of the hammer, best way to do is look at the back hook. It looks like a question mark. The back of the question mark is the back of the hammer. Pop that off. And Thor also gets this, which is a swooshing effect that you can add to the hammer. And it gets a little difficult to get that on because everything is kind of butting up against itself to give you something like this. And yes, Spot did struggle at it. It's not the easiest to get that pegged in. It's very tight. But you can get it more of a swooshing action if you want to have Thor displayed a little bit more dynamic. I likely will not display him like this, but I can tell you though, getting this on can be a little on the difficult side. Getting them off is not so much of an issue, and revisiting the original stem, or the original end of the hammer, it's very, very difficult to, again, get those pegged into place. But I probably would just display it like this. It's neat though that they give you something like this as well. Rounding out the rest of the accessories, holding hammers would be a little difficult because Thor's currently got closed fists, but they also give you a ton of interchangeable hands as well. A couple of flat palms, open-faced hands. He's also got a couple of closed fists, partially closed fists, and again, a couple of partially closed fists as well. Now the hands are pliable just in the sense that you can get the hammer in place. You have to really do a lot of finagling though to get it into his hand. One thing I should probably stress, and stress being the operative word, is that it does make things difficult to get Thor to hold the hammer properly. Because the hands and fingers are so close together, what you will need to do is spend a good amount of time to stretch the fingers away from the palm as well as the thumb, just enough to get the clearance on the hammer. It may not look difficult, but believe you me, you might want to spend a good amount of time adjusting those hands to get them to properly hold the hammer. Another thing I also want to mention too is that the hands, there are two different types of hands as we've looked at, or technically three types of hands. The ones that are on a slight angle, and let me show you a comparison here. See how these hands are more straight? These ones here are more of an angle, like the hand is leaning forward. These are the hands that you would want to use for the handle of the hammer. The ones that have the straight fingers, or the straight regular hand that isn't angled, are the ones that you want to use for the hook and bottom of the hammer if you want to have Thor swinging it. Likely, again, I'd just be displaying Thor with the hammer as you see here. I will not likely have him displayed holding the hammer from the hook. But we can just go ahead and switch the hand out. Let's just slide it off of its ball joint here and replace the hand now with the hammer. And there you have Thor with Mjolnir, and it looks awesome. All the stress of getting those fingers spread apart was well worth it, as this is now the final, the end result of how I'm going to have Thor displayed. I'll likely, of course, display him also with the hammer more so up, you know, and maybe have his head kind of angled to the side. I'll do something a little bit more impressive than that. But that looks really good. I mean, it's a shame. It's a shame that the hammer was not sectional. Like, this section could not have popped off, and the hammer simply just slid through the hand and then popped the end of the hammer on. Instead, no, you do have to do a little bit of prying on the fingers to get the hammer in place. When it comes to Thor's poseability, it's about what you would expect from a Play Arts Kai release. His head is on a ball joint. Now, his head is ball jointed twice. Ball jointed that attaches to the base of the head, and then he's got a secondary ball joint at the base or stem of the neck. Shoulders hinge out. Nice ratcheted joint there. They rotate forward and back. He has a well, he has a little bit of a bicep swivel, but it's hindered slightly by the shoulder pad area here. This other arm, no issues whatsoever. He's got a ratcheted joint in the elbow area, a rotation and hinge in the hand itself. Upper torso ball joint, very fluent motion there in the ball joint area. He doesn't have any ball joint at the base of his waist area where the waist starts. He's got a ratcheted joint in the leg, a swivel point at the top cut of the thigh, double hinge knee, and finally I love these ratcheted joints. Ratchet joint in the ankle, as well as a rotation. There's no pivot per se, but he does also have a. It looks like there would have been a hinge at the base of the foot, but there is actually no hinge there. It's probably just the way that it's been assembled. And then, of course, finally, we've already discussed this before. He's got the individual hinges in the cape, where the cape awkwardly will look like that. I mean, unless you hide it from the front of the figure, because you're not going to see that split cut at the back there. Or what you can also do too As Spot had already mentioned, you can rotate these to the side if you want something a little bit more dynamic. And that looks super cool. Yes, despite a few little hiccups that I wish wasn't necessarily the case, the changing out the end of the hammer could be a little harder at times to get to switch out for the swooshing if you want to go for something different than that. I wish the hammer could have been added to the hand a little bit different other than having to pry the fingers. Wasn't crazy about that. And I don't like the fact that you have to pop the head off the ball joint, a very thin neck to that ball joint in order to replace the face. If those could have been fixed, I would have thought that this was a perfect figure. That being said, the figure is still fantastic with a little bit of little nitpicks here and there. Where we had a look at the Captain America, and I knew Captain America really was not to everyone's cup of tea. It's a little bit different of a figure look of design of Captain America. Without any doubt, this looks like Thor. Square-Enix kind of did, I think, a good job of giving their spin of what their Thor could look like while still keeping Thor very rooted in the design that we know and love. If you can find this figure, I would say it's worth picking up, despite the hiccups, despite the fact that the changing of the fingers and getting the hammer into the fingers and the face itself. Despite that, I would say this figure is really worthy of your collection. Again, Spot picked this up from the folks over at Entertainment Earth, so if you'd like to add this guy to your collection, Spot will put the link down below. Today's collectible spot, we were having a look at the Variant Play Arts Kai figure release of Mighty Thor. Stay tuned, guys. Spot's going to have more collectible spots heading your way. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time.